Welcome to the Diversity Connector podcast, where we explore the rich tapestry of human experiences. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging, and together as we dive into conversations that bridge cultures, challenge stereotypes, and celebrate the unique perspectives each of us brings to the table. Each episode is a journey through stories and insights from a kaleidoscope of voices, each sharing their colorful narrative. Whether you're at home, on the go, or just anywhere in between, you're now part of a community that values understanding, inclusivity, and the beauty of diversity. So plug in your headphones, get comfortable, and let's connect through the power of our shared stories. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on the Diversity Connector podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Diversity Connector. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating young woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Hi everyone, my name is Nakshathra Suresh. I am based in Sydney, Australia. I live and work in Darug Land and Darug Nation, and I work as a cyber criminologist. I'm also the co-founder of a social enterprise initiative called IRIS. I'm an academic and educator as well. I focus on teaching first-year criminology. I'm a speaker, primarily focusing on online safety and everything that comes to do with digital spaces and well-being. And outside of that, I'm also an affiliate for a global nonprofit called All Tech is Human. So we work on all the issues regarding the responsible tech ecosystem. And part of what I am mostly passionate about is the intersection of psychological well-being, digital safety, and ensuring that everyone feels safe online and has the right to a safe digital space when they do interact with any type of technology. My background is in criminology. I did both my undergraduate degree and my postgraduate degree in criminology and criminal justice. I did work for the federal government for about 4 years in different spaces in intelligence, policy, law enforcement, and oversight roles. And after that, I realized that as a result of my thesis, which was on stalking and cyber stalking in Australia, that there was a gap when it came to digital literacy. And that's what brought about my idea for IRIS with my lovely co-founder, who also specializes in online gender-based violence. And we realized that there was a gap when it came to providing digestible, short-form content that people can consume when it comes to their online safety, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, dating apps, gaming applications, immersive technologies, artificial intelligence. There needs to be more of an understanding of how to stay safe online and what sort of data is being passed back and forth. So we wanted to empower the ultimate end user when it came to these online technologies. So as a result, we are building this tool that will hopefully encourage more people to have more proactive choices when it comes to their online safety, as well as empowering businesses, organizations, startups with the ability to effectively integrate safety into their solutions and their industries as well. So they can become leaders and visionaries in technologies and adopting the new types of solutions that come their way in the next 5 to 10 years, but also having a long-term vision for their longevity as well. Outside of that, I am an avid mental health advocate. So I have lived experience of online harassment as well as cyberbullying from a young age as well as an adult. So that was super important to me to integrate into the intersectional lens of what we do in a tech-based solution as well. So I constantly advocate for marginalized communities, people like me, but also people who are far more underprivileged than me as well, especially our First Nations communities here. As I'm based in Australia, always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So I do understand that their relationship with technology is far different to those who have encountered digital literacy from a young age as well. Culturally and linguistically diverse communities, those who belong to refugee and migrant backgrounds, women especially, are the gender disparity is greater with individuals who experience online harassment. They are primarily female and non-binary, so including LGBT folk as well. And anyone who doesn't fall within the traditional class of having the ability to access digital technologies and devices, it's really important that they are given the opportunity to encourage positive and safe relationships with technology. So I think that's really important. That comes out with what both myself and my co-founder do with Iris. And another thing that's really important for me is educating people in a way that is accessible for them. So as an educator myself, as an academic, when I teach my university students, I always encourage freedom of thinking and giving people the opportunity to form their own opinion with giving them the facts and the figures that they need in order to make that choice and that decision for themselves. So as part of my vision, I always want to encourage people to find the facts. And if I'm able to deliver those facts for them to be able to create a conscious decision as a result of that, but would never encourage you to go one way or the other, because everyone should have the autonomy and freedom of expression. But obviously, being an expert in this space myself as a cybercriminologist, I am able to discern what is probably more negative than positive, and to be able to give that information to people in an effective, accessible way is incredibly important for me as a human being, but also as someone who engages with technologies, that there are people who are far less privileged than me that need to have this information at hand. So yeah, that's a little summary about me and my background. Personally, English is my third language. I was born in India and I moved here when I was 5. So I know English, Malayalam, Tamil, and I am a little bit of Telugu, but my language primarily is Malayalam and Tamil. So when I learned English, I realized that there was obviously difficulties coming across when it came to digital types of abuse and stuff, that I wasn't able to understand nuances when it came to harassment. And it's obviously very different when you come from a cultural background that doesn't really engage with digital technologies as much. And obviously, choosing an unconventional career path as a criminologist, I realized, again, the different nuances and privileges that come with being someone who is of South Asian background and living in a Western country. You kind of have to balance both identities and try and make your mark in this world. So it's been really fun navigating different careers over the course of the last 5 years, at least for me. And obviously, being in my mid-20s, I know that this is just the beginning of what I very strongly believe will be a fantastic career, surrounded by wonderful support network and all the support that I've been receiving from my professional connections, as well as everyone that I meet in the course of my work as well.
So thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. It's always fascinating when I meet other women of color who are here in Australia and breaking into these spaces that you are not normally found. So let's start off with the cybersecurity and inclusivity. How does Iris approach the challenge of making digital literacy accessible and inclusive for people of all backgrounds, particularly those who may feel marginalized in online spaces?
Of course. So one of the biggest values, or some of the values that we represent at Iris, is the intersectionality. So both myself and my co-founder are women. I am obviously culturally and linguistically diverse. I'm also part of the LGBTQ plus community. And for me, one of the things that was really important was to make this content accessible for people like me, but also people who have not had the ability to have digital literacy like me as well. So I have grown up on the internet. I am Gen Z. I know what the internet is like, but what if someone who is also culturally and linguistically diverse, or part of the LGBTQ plus community, or part of First Nations community and is a woman and has not had the ability to engage with digital technologies in the same way that I have, what is the risk associated with that? So when we started thinking about how to form the products for Iris and the tools for Iris, we wanted to make sure that it is entirely culturally sensitive and considering all the nuances from people who belong to a global South population. So, for example, South Asia, South America, Africa, all these nations who look at digital abuse very differently. And the cultures of shame and guilt that is associated when it comes to harassment online, when it comes to abuse online. These are all very nuanced, and they all come from a different type of perspective that you need to adopt in order to provide a culturally sensitive solution. So it all starts with language. And what we aim to do when we deliver our education is obviously come at it from the perspective of there is no shame in having experienced any form of harassment online. And I think that is the overarching banner that we would like to put forward with Iris. Our aim is to create safer digital spaces for people of all communities. And when you log on to the internet, to have the ability to have a safe space online, especially if you are from a marginalized community, you need to perhaps rewire your thinking through the education that we provide, that there is no shame in what you have experienced. If you have experienced any form of abuse or harassment, you are a survivor of that, and you can empower yourself to continue to stay online, and you shouldn't have to be at the center of victim blaming if you are if you have experienced something like that. You should continue to stay online. You should be able to access all of the different things that you should be able to access. You shouldn't have to limit your connections with your friends and family on various social media just because you have experienced that. The onus is beyond the ultimate end user, we believe. So the accountability is obviously very different. There's big tech platforms, there's regulators, there's governments, there's trust and safety spaces, there's policy, there's legislation, and then all of that, when you look at a hierarchy and then you have the ultimate end user, the power is much, much greater than you can comprehend when you sign up for an account on a social media platform or a dating or a gaming platform, wherever that is. So a long-winded response to your question, putting the trauma at the core and making that culturally, racially sensitive to all the audiences that may interact with that platform. Because you and I both know, being in Australia, it's such a multiculturally diverse community, and not just from a race and cultural background, but the variety of different identities, that people are not just solely their identity, but a convergence of identities, right? So we need to make sure that we cover every single type of individual that interacts with the internet, and allowing them the freedom to choose whether a particular platform may be for them, and giving them the education and the tools to encourage positive places on the internet for them as well.
So can you explain how intersectionality influences your work in cyber safety, and why it's crucial to consider this perspective when addressing online abuse?
Absolutely. So women of color and non-binary folks of color, gender diverse individuals of color, are statistically more significantly likely to experience abuse online. And that is purely because we come from nations and backgrounds which we have been taught to suppress our emotions and feelings. And when we do come online and we make statements that are culturally relevant to what we have experienced, Western nations don't look at that in a very positive light, because it's very different to the experience of those who live in a Western culture. Majority of these platforms were built and developed by individuals from a Caucasian background. So when you think of the technical back end of majority of these softwares and technologies, they were built with a Eurocentric mindset. And when I say Eurocentric, I'm obviously referring to a lot of the developers in Silicon Valley, but not just exclusive to them. But there is a demographic there of software developers, engineers, data scientists who build these applications with Caucasian people in mind. Even though they know that there are a number of other demographics that interact with them, the intention is always to have a greater Caucasian majority on these platforms. As a result, we are marginalized not only in our physical spaces, but in online spaces, because it's not sensitive to our background. So when you do post something about your own individual experience or something that might be relevant to your culture, for example, a festival or a family gathering, you are immediately perceived as different. And that is inherently the contextual collapse that happens between online and offline spaces. Which means that cyber safety, to answer your second question, cyber safety refers to the potential harms that anyone can experience when they interact with any cyber medium. Cybersecurity is different because it's obviously the technical, the software, the security, the inherent networks that connect any type of technology. But we're talking about psychosocial safety. We're talking about mental health and well-being. We're talking about the ultimate end user there. With the background that I've given, cyber safety is incredibly important for people who come from intersectional backgrounds, and for all these developers to consider the social harms that are perpetrated by their particular platform because they have a particular thing that doesn't exist, or they have a thing that does exist. So a certain feature that they might introduce in an application or a technology might actually ostracize a particular demographic of people because they haven't implemented feedback cycles with that particular demographic to understand why it might not be accessible to them. And that can be anywhere from, the emergence of a new feature when we go on the App Store and we update all the different applications that we have on iOS or Android. It will say, oh, this new feature coming out has on this update has this particular thing. I always wonder whether they've actually just created that update or that feature with every single demographic that interacts with that platform in mind, or whether they were just like, yep, we're not going to do any focus groups. We're just going to release it and see what happens. And as a result, the intersectionality aspect is completely removed. Because if you're creating products for Western societies and individuals in global South regions who interact with Western applications, intersectionality is not at the forefront of anyone's mind. And therefore, cyber safety is not at the forefront of anyone's mind as well. People just want to be online. And I think that's to the advantage of a lot of big tech platforms that people just want to be online. They want to stay online, and they will just cop anything that comes their way because they want to stay connected to the news or friends or family or influencers or their favorite celebrities. And that's a write-off for them.
That's such a pity. So with 1 in 2 people experiencing cyber abuse, what do you believe are the biggest hurdles in holding individuals and platforms accountable in digital spaces?
I will answer this in 2 parts. The first part is individuals, because as I mentioned before, there's a hierarchy when it comes to accountability in digital spaces. And that hierarchy obviously changes with what jurisdiction you are part of. Unfortunately, in this day and age, because we all live online, it's become encompassed in our real world. There's no longer this difference of online and offline. There is this contextual collapse that exists. So it's just a continuum of violence. And that violence is often, I would say, there's not a lot of people who understand that spectrum of violence, especially people in positions of authority like law enforcement, government regulators, people who enforce the policy, whether it's politicians and their counterparts in public service roles, as well as big tech platforms. So if you look at the grander scope of things and people who are in higher positions of authority, the biggest hurdles that we will experience with them is that people actually benefit from digital abuse occurring, because there needs to be this scale of positive and negative when it comes to any form of digital spaces, as the same in physical spaces as well.
Yeah.
There needs to be a balance. I'm a criminologist by background. Part of my degree is obviously why crime occurs, and the other part of my degree is what are the failures of the criminal justice system that allow for crime to reoccur, or justice not being given to victims and perpetrators and all the people that belong to the justice system. So when I look at it, when I see the hurdles, I see that, you know, big tech platforms actually quite benefit from having abuse being perpetrated on their platform, which allows them to continuously repeat that cycle, because people are able to identify, oh, okay, there's this particular portion in our application that is actually really harmful to a certain set of people. Okay, we have to continue working on that, but, you know, there is a portion of victims that exist out there that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. For them, it's actually, okay, it's a minor problem in comparison to the other billion users that use our platform. Same with governments, same with regulators. Unfortunately, they can't handle every single, you know, case that comes their way. There is an issue with digital literacy, that when it comes to individuals who work in these roles, often they may not have direct contact with the victim survivors. So at some point, you do start seeing victim survivors as numbers rather than people, and cases instead of people. So there's a huge issue with automation that I think is a hurdle when it comes to the collective infrastructure from the tech side, because there's no longer human moderation, and rightfully so. We live in an age where there are digital advancements, and there needs to be more focus on the mental health and well-being of content moderators and people who work in the trust and safety space. Like, I definitely agree that there needs to be a focus there. But automation actually removes the human element, which means that when we are in interpersonal and interconnected spaces, as we are every single day, the automation means that you are treated, again, like a number, a case file, and you are not perceived as a human, because obviously it's a robot on the other end that is reviewing your case.
How does IRIS's educational and training programs differ from the traditional approaches to digital literacy, and what impact have you observed so far?
Sure. So we're obviously still building out IRIS, and we're doing a couple of consultancy projects at the moment, and interviewing digital experts, and really just trying to amplify how big of a problem this is, because it's a social impact initiative. A lot of the conversations that we have with people often stem from, oh, I didn't know it was that big of a problem. And then I obviously throw that statistic saying 1 in 2 individuals will experience any form of cyber abuse. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that.
Such a big deal.
It is a big deal. And I don't think people acknowledge it as much, because like I said, it's a write-off. Most people just want to come online, and they are willing to cop any abuse that is there, because they want to stay online and they want to stay connected. Unfortunately, you know, it's not evenly distributed, and people who, you know, come from marginalized backgrounds will experience it more. Women will experience it more. First Nations communities will experience it more. People who are in the public eye will experience it more. So journalists, influencers, celebrities, these are all people that you obviously know that they have a lot of money, but they are still human at the end of the day, and they shouldn't have to experience the level of trolling or abuse or harmful behavior. But to your question, where we see fitting ourselves in this gap is that most common digital literacy initiatives, especially in Australia, are focused on young people, especially those who are children and youth, and empowering parents, having those conversations with parents and children and teachers and educators. There is a large gap with adults. It's almost as if you turn 18 and people are like, you are no longer a child, you have to go and educate yourself, and
Right.
we can't give you any of the support or tools or mechanisms available to help you empower yourself. And when you think about it, when you're 18, you were still a child. You were a child a year ago. You might have only graduated from high school that year, or you might be in your first year of uni. And
Yes.
we have identified with our research that the age demographic of both perpetrators and victims of cyber abuse are from the ages of 18 to 30.
Oh,
Right?
wow.
So
There's a
it's
big
a
gap
very,
there.
yeah, and it's a very young population that is both a
Mhm.
victim and perpetrator. So we
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that our education targets individuals of this age group in a way that makes sense for them. You can't give PDF sheets and long presentations and, masses and masses of information to a group of people who have basically grown up online. It
Yeah.
needs to bite-sized pieces of information, interesting pieces of information that allows
Mhm.
autonomy and choice. And obviously, I'm
Yes.
not excluding the other age groups here. If you're over the age of 50 or 60, I can't imagine, I use a personal anecdote here, I can't imagine my mom or my dad having to sift through a massive information just so they know how to report something when
Yeah.
it happens to them. It needs to be
So,
accessible, and it
mm,
needs to be something that they can find and engage with, that they're like, okay, I actually have the ability to do this myself instead of relying on someone else.
so in your view, what are the ethical considerations that should be at the forefront when developing technology solutions to combat cyber abuse?
Ethical considerations. So I have one specifically when it comes to artificial intelligence and the adoption of artificial intelligence. I've
Mhm.
certainly seen an uptick of a lot of startups and businesses adopting artificial intelligence because obviously it streamlines their work, and it might, increase their productivity, increases employee retention, and obviously diversifies their workload as well, which is all very positive things for employees and organizations. The other drawback, and this is something that I focus on, is inherently that everyone talks about the technical side of AI and how, like I said, it increases productivity. There are these psychosocial harms that result as artificial intelligence is integrated into our day-to-day lives. So if you are a business, an individual, a company, an organization that uses artificial intelligence, the psychosocial hazards that exist in your organizations are often amplified because now your employees or people who work in your organizations that are not employed in a capacity, they are relying on a sentient being in order to complete their tasks, and often have a strange parasocial relationship with a robot, a large language model that is inherently biased. And it learns more about you the more that you prompt engineer it. It learns more about you the more information that you provide to it. And I remember someone telling me that, when they first started using ChatGPT, their mum was like inputting like credit card information and all sorts of identifying information into this application. And obviously that's concerning because you come from the age of hacking and credit card phishing and scams and all these different types of cybercrime, and you're relying on artificial intelligence to provide you with an output that's actually supposed to benefit your life, but it's actually collecting all this information that can eventually be used against you. So when I think of ethical considerations, I think of people who are building this type of technology. Or I think of startups that are using artificial intelligence and GPT models and LLMs and building all these different types of technology, but they're not running appropriate or comprehensive feedback cycles with people of different communities to realize how they may marginalize a particular community as a result of doing this type of work or creating this type of solution. Or they might actually amplify a harm. For example, if you're building a chatbot that is a conversational chatbot, do you think that this might replicate a human relationship? I was talking about this on a previous podcast, but obviously we know that there are relationship chatbots out there that are similar to, you can date an AI chatbot, and people can talk to these chatbots, and obviously it learns from the way that you write and the words that you use and the style and the tone and everything that you use. And as a result, it will agree with everything that you say. And then you go out into the real world and you might have a conversation with someone else and realize that, your AI was actually agreeing with everything that you're saying, but other people are out in the real world, in your offline world, it's not the same. They have diverse perspectives. They're going to disagree with you. And from a crime background, if you're a cyber criminal, you're more likely to engage with products, services, and chatbots that agree with you rather than people who disagree with you. And it contributes to, this culture of, especially women who are experience this online, men who don't want to have conversations with women because they constantly reject them or disagree with them will go to these AI chatbots, get everything, all their opinions agreed on there, and then go and inflict harm in their physical world with women around them because they are unable to differentiate between the tone of voice with a chatbot versus another woman on the internet or someone in their physical space. So again, another ethical consideration for developers and people who are intending to create and technical products is to always have the ultimate end user in mind.
How have your experiences in incubator programs like StartMate and you in the University of New South Wales founders shaped your approach to developing and scaling Iris?
Sure. So obviously my background is in cyber criminology, and I had no idea what the A to Z of entrepreneurship would be. I had not even considered an MBA, anything to do with business. I've been passionately devoted to criminology my whole life. So the opportunities that I've received from StartMate, UNSW founders, Blackbird, the Australian School of Entrepreneurship, really opened up my eyes to how to develop a social impact solution that is embedded in your own personal values, as well as perhaps, depending on whatever your product is, generating money or generating impact. So I think a lot of the time when you think of a startup, you think of, okay, we need to get 10x revenue, 100x revenue. And it's always in a money-minded mindset. And if I'm honest, I did approach the initial days of Iris with this mindset. But then I started thinking about what are the other metrics of success that I can use that would be able to tell people the successes of Iris. And it doesn't have to be rooted in money, but it can be rooted in how many people that we've reached, how many people's lives that we've changed. And social impact initiatives like Iris, but there are a number of other initiatives as well in the climate change space, in environmental spaces, in diversity and inclusion spaces, and those that help communities better their lives, and not in a financial sense, but improving their quality of life.
Yes.
That's what I've learned from these programs, that you can have an idea, you can have a vision for a project, and it doesn't necessarily need to generate, $1 billion. But if you affect a group of people and change their lives for the better, that is significantly better than what you were doing yesterday. And you're continuously becoming an entrepreneur and someone who strives for the betterment of society.
So let's finish off with advice. What advice would you give to young professionals or students who are interested in pursuing a career in cyber criminology, especially those from the underrepresented groups?
Challenge yourself. I think my biggest goal in life is to always put myself in situations where I feel uncomfortable, because I know that if I'm uncomfortable, there's something in me that needs to be tapped into. And always testing my boundaries is like, every day I wake up and I'm like, how can I test myself today? How can I challenge myself today? And I think when you come from a background that always talks about staying within the margins and within the boundaries, and you never, speak up, and you never do anything unconventional. You always have to come from you're either a doctor or an engineer, or you're a medical scientist, or you're doing something in a field that everyone knows. Yes. You're constantly going to be, people are always going to question your integrity. People are always going to question the validity of your career and who you are as a person. But your identity is so much more beyond your career and the path that you have chosen. Fundamentally, as a human being, if you feel challenged and you feel inspired to wake up every single day and make a positive impact on someone's life, I think that is what is important. If you want to get into cyber criminology, I highly encourage it. With the future of artificial intelligence and immersive technologies, we need more criminologists on board. My advice would be to build your network and reach out to people like myself and all the amazing other people who are also cyber criminologists as well. We can provide you with guidance and how you should shape your career. But I would also encourage learning different types of skill sets. So obviously I am, again, in my mid-20s now, but I have a background in the federal government. I have background in academia. I have a background as a speaker. I have a background as an entrepreneur, and these are all diverse skill sets that will take you anywhere. And I don't limit myself to just calling myself a cyber criminologist, because I wear so many different hats that, the hats are reaching here now. And I think that's really important, to have a diverse skill set, and don't just limit yourself to the one possibility, because honestly, the world is your
world's the limit. Yeah. Thank you. Wow, what an inspiring conversation. Thank you so much for coming online and sharing your story with us today.
Thank you so much, Gertrude. It was a pleasure, and I really appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
And thank you to everybody who's tuned in today. The Diversity Connector is a platform that brings you the stories and voices of people from all over the world. We share our stories to uplift you, inspire you, energize you, but most importantly, to empower you with knowledge and skills to take you from where you are now to where you want to go. So tune in again tomorrow when I interview yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and bye for now. And that's a wrap, everybody, on today's episode of the Diversity Connector podcast. Thank you for tuning in and being part of our vibrant and global conversation. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a tapestry of diverse perspectives. Remember, every story you've heard today is a thread in the larger fabric of our shared humanity. So, as you step back into your world, carry these stories with you and let them inspire you to embrace and celebrate the rich diversity around us. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these inspiring stories with more listeners. Do follow us on social media by looking for the Diversity Connector podcast for more updates. Until then, keep connecting, keep listening, and keep celebrating the beauty of diversity. This is the Diversity Connector podcast signing off. Stay curious, stay open,